Welcome to the Virtual CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping service-based businesses achieve success. Are you a business owner interested in learning how to scale your business? Has your business reached over $1 million in annual revenue? Then this podcast is for you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. Very excited to bring Tom Barrett back, but this time with a little bit of a change. So last time we had Tom Barrett on, he was talking about the EOS system and has recently made the change to Pinnacle. So we're really excited to bring Tom back and talk about the change, but let's just start there. So Tom, how did you come about making this big switch?
In terms of doing what I do, helping companies grow, I've always been on the hunt for the best tools and systems and ideas and constructs that are out there. And so for part of my journey, that was for over 3 years being in the EOS community, which was a phenomenal experience. I absolutely loved it, it continues to be a great system. But about a year and a half ago, they had a business model change. They went from a membership agreement with their implementers to a franchise agreement, and it just wasn't for me, that model. So I left the EOS community, and now I'm part of Pinnacle.
Great.
So kind of give us a background for those that didn't see the first podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what your background is, where you came from, and kind of progress all the way through EOS to the Pinnacle right now.
Yeah. So, rewinding the tape back about 7 years, my wife, Tracy, and myself, we started Navigate the Journey. So Tracy's pretty well known in much of the agency world as well. And so, Navigate the Journey, we basically help, companies in 3 areas. One is to plan their life. So that's a process we have. Second is grow their teams, team health, human resources, those kinds of things. And then the third bucket is the one that I focus on, and that's really growing and scaling their business. And so, over those 7 years, we've used a number of different processes and tools and approaches. We've worked a lot with agencies. So, it's just been a journey, and it continues to evolve, as we'll talk about here today. But again, for us, though, it's always about being open-minded to what will work best, and also having the experience of what doesn't work makes us continually sort of tweak our approach so that, again, we're being highly effective.
Okay, so if I'm an agency, I'm listening to this podcast, I'm like, an operating system. I've always wanted a business operating system, business system to really help us go. Why would I consider Pinnacle? What's the best path there?
Yeah. So here I'm going to take a kind of a bigger step back. So I think in this whole, if you're an agency considering, what operating system or what whole approach do we take to sort of working on the agency? Kind of a really brief history, I think, is worth us talking about, because there's lots of great concepts from, the main operating systems out there. So it all goes back to Michael Gerber, I think, in the E-Myth. There's a whole classic series of books there, but, he's got some very helpful thoughts. I think that all agencies, again, thinking about operating system, like you got to discern, the things that are really key from his whole methodology, especially around, are you an entrepreneur, a manager, or a technician? And he's also got some really good things on process and having a turnkey kind of franchise approach to your business. Then next was The Great Game of Business. Jack Stack took over a failing manufacturing company and just turned it around financially, but really kind of pioneered open book management and getting everybody, including people working on the shop floor, really understanding how they could actually influence profit. And of course, they had a big profit share pool and all that. And that whole Great Game of Business, again, is another great one to discern, what can you learn from that, getting everybody rowing truly in the same direction. Then Vern Harnish came along in the early 90s. He wrote a book called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. And then a few years later, he wrote Scaling Up, about 10 years later, which is kind of up-leveling his ideas in Rockefeller Habits. And then in between those two books, Gino Wickman wrote Traction, of course, where EOS comes from. And then more recently, one of Stephen Covey's sons wrote a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. So, and it has obviously some great nuggets on execution. And probably the other one I'll mention as well that's pretty popular out there is OKRs, right? I think OKRs are great for enterprise-sized companies, but I think for smaller businesses, kind of lacks the robustness of some of these other systems. So that's kind of the quick history. And I think all again, everybody should be aware of at least the nuggets that are in each of those systems. So where Pinnacle comes along is our approach is really a best of the best. We look at all those different systems. They all have something to teach us. And we know where the source code is, right? There's really nothing new under the sun, right? These are all timeless concepts, universal principles that work in businesses across the board. And so in Pinnacle, what we've done is we've taken this best of the best approach and created a model with very specific tools and a process that's really going to combine the best of those systems, but also we keep adding to the Pinnacle model and tools. We have a concept called the endless toolbox, and I think we're up to like 70 or so tools now, and we just keep adding them every quarter. So yeah, that's kind of the brief history and how Pinnacle came about.
You mentioned tools. What is a tool? We're not talking about a hammer and nail. We're talking about what?
So yeah, I mean, so it's basically kind of like the exercises. Well, in part, exercises we run companies through. So so I guess a tool, because it has core values, right? So companies should have core values. So we have tools that will help them get there, or even rocks as well. So just very tangible, artifacts, things you need to figure out to run a better business. And there's another thing about tools as well. So in many ways, right, they're really mental tools, mental constructs, because one of probably the greatest untapped thing in businesses is basically people's potential, right? The thinking of individuals, the creativity, the thoughts of individuals. But then if you combine an entire team together, unleashing that creativity and potential and vision and the strategy to take the business higher. So these tools are basically just constructs for us to lead people through thinking and then discussing to land on what's the right and best answer for us. So
it's not a one size fits all type of thing. It's figuring the right tool, the right way of presenting it.
Yes. So that's also one of the differentiators with Pinnacle as well. So we some of the other systems out there take a very kind of rigid and very sequential approach to implementation with a business. But with Pinnacle, we basically come along and just first understand where's the business at. Maybe you've probably done some or maybe much of this already, this kind of work. So if you've got core values, we don't need to redo that. And so so we can kind of come in where maybe you're weaker, where you have the most potential, and just sort of start there.
So I'm happy to say, I'll go here. I'm going to cut in, Jody. So yeah, I'm happy to say that, you mentioned all those books. And one of the things that we've added to our training program is when people first start, we have them going through books. And we have 3 of those books that you mentioned as part of our training program, plus the Pinnacle book. So we're doing pretty good there in terms of where we're starting. But my follow-up question here is I love when you come on, and I love talking to you about some of the stories you have from doing implementations. Can you tell us, now that you're doing Pinnacle, a story from a recent implementation or a recent meeting you've had with a company that really will hit the spot with another company that might be considering you?
Yeah. So I probably think of a few. So, well, maybe the best category is sort of like taking clients that I had for quite a while, on one system, and then converting them over to Pinnacle, and sort of them getting to experience everything that was really very similar, but then getting to experience what's new and extra, and sort of the place where I've been able to go deeper on is sort of true strategy. And so, strategy is kind of a very squishy word, but I think it's all about being unique and valuable in the marketplace. And so that's something that a lot of my clients have just not really done deep thinking on. And so we've got 2 different tools for this, constructs, right? So one is Jim Collins's Flywheel. So if you've read Good to Great, right, that's one of his findings there. Basically, businesses that could, kind of graphically illustrate usually like 5 or 6 key activities that would make the business spin like a flywheel to like grow and scale profitably. And so that's been again for clients I've had for 2-3 plus years, actually like they've had some of the biggest insights they ever have by actually truly clarifying what their flywheel is. And of course, once you do that, you can then rate, how are we doing with each of these circles, these activities today? And of course, that becomes, obviously then, annual goals and rocks, and how do you improve the financial performance, right, by improving various parts of that. So that's the hedgehog concept. Another one that's I've had a lot of success with is something called the one phrase strategy and differentiating activities. So this again is another strategy tool. So an example or one that everybody would know about is Southwest Airlines. So most successful airline ever. In all kinds of ways, including financially. And so if you boil down their strategy, how they're unique and valuable, you can boil it down to two words. It's wheels up, right? It's all about asset utilization, right? Flying those airplanes as much as possible in a given day and flying them more than their competitors. And then what are their differentiating activities, right? The differentiating activities make the one phrase strategy come to life. So for Southwest, fly one type of airplane, flying to secondary airports, even their boarding process, things like that, right? So I'll give that example to a client. Then it's like, all right, we got to figure out what is our one phrase strategy and what are our differentiating activities. Again, typically clients have never thought that way, never had the conversations. And then of course, when they land on their answers, again, it's kind of really eye-opening. And of course, you can then start to go back and go, okay, well, what KPIs do we need to start tracking? Again, annual goals, rocks, change in process, change in who we're selling to. So I've had a lot of success with those two tools in particular.
Is that something you'd spend like hours on or days on? Or how would you, what would a typical engagement kind of look like?
Yeah. Well, yeah, no. So they're really, hour or two, you can make a lot of progress in both. With the flywheel, Jim Collins has this little book. It's like a 30, 40 page book. I have teams read ahead of time and it gives them examples and it kind of just explains the concepts more. So they kind of walk in kind of knowing it. And then I walk them through just a series of questions and exercises. And then I have each person create what they think the flywheel is. And then we look at each person's and then we land on one together. And we can typically do that in 90 minutes on average and get, stick the landing first time, get it 80-90% of the way there. And then with the one phrase strategy, differentiating activities, it's kind of similar. It's kind of one of those things, it's just, teams are being, open and honest and people are just throwing out ideas and, let the best idea win. There's only so many potential ideas ultimately. So again, probably like 90 minutes, give or take, you can get there. But it's also helpful when you've done other things, right? The other parts, the other tools, right? That Pinnacle brings, you're going to be able to get there faster if you've got the organizational clarity, in other ways.
So you mentioned for the first one that they did a little bit of homework ahead of time. Is that pretty typical that they have to do a little bit of work going into it? And then the follow-up question to that is, what would you say is key to having a successful event with you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So generally, I actually don't like assigning too much homework. It sort of depends. There's some very specific tools, especially the flywheel, where I think it is helpful. That's probably more exceptional because what I typically like to do is just show up, have a full day session with a client, where they're shutting off their connection to the outside world and just really doing a deep dive on the business. And so we just do it all in the room, right? And that's part of having me there as an outside facilitator and teacher. But in terms of what to have a successful engagement, I think for me, I've gotten to a place where I really will only work with a client if they're willing to commit to, at least one day a quarter and at least for 2 years. So because figuring out all these kinds of things, it is a process, right? And, there's always a next level. And then these different sort of tools and constructs, they all sort of build upon each other. And, so it's not like you can kind of come in like 2 or 3 intense days, figure it all out and the client's good. So I'm really at a place where it's typically like 24 months commitment to really get them to the place where they need to be.
Yeah, I like your approach a lot because we had a consultant. This has been 15 years ago or so that we came in the office and was there for 3 days. Went through a bunch of stuff with us, and we're really pumped, excited. This is the greatest thing ever. And then that person left, and then it was like back to normal. It didn't last. It lasted maybe just a month, maybe, and it kind of just dwindled down to nothing. Whereas your approach isn't like that at all. Your approach is, hey, I'm going to pound it in for a 2 or 3 day course, but then we're going to follow up and meet quarterly for the next 2 years. I think is by far the better approach there.
Yeah, and kind of truth be told, and I've seen this, with a lot of clients, is that when I first start working with them, team health is not where it needs to be. So their ability to actually get in a room and have a highly productive full day together is typically not there. They actually have to learn how to do, this different kind of thinking and discussing and making decisions together, because they're also making, typically bigger decisions about the business, right? What is our vision, our strategy, our plan, who's our core customer, all those kinds of things. And so even often the early phase is just sort of getting the team health to be where it needs to be. Some of the other things too that I find early on is that it's really easy to set goals and rocks, right? Anybody can do that, but it's a whole other thing to actually accomplish them. So typically the first few quarters, the goal completion, the rock completion is not great. Sometimes it's horrendous. And it's a little bit of like, yeah, and that's okay. And that's often the best thing that can happen, because every time in a quarterly, I'm always doing, okay, lessons learned. Even if you hit all your rocks, well, maybe the rocks were they were not ambitious enough, right? We should have stretched ourselves more, or we didn't hit any of them. So did we pick the wrong rocks? It was just how we executed on them. And so you need to, like, experience is the best teacher, and you sort of have to get into all these things to actually learn. And I think we all learn best by our mistakes, actually not by just, going 6 for 6 on whatever all the time.
So you mentioned the team health. I think that's really important. And that's often where I will try to bring you in, is when I'm working with a client and it just seems like they're not on the same page. So that's often where I bring you in. So I'm curious, I would say not all team health issues are fixable. So I'm curious about how often you see it as, that those conversations get to that point where it's hard. Because again, if Jody and I are working in a meeting together and he's dead set on selling coffee, and I'm like, I don't think a CPA firm should ever sell coffee. And like, that's something you might not ever get us on the same page on. So how do you work in those difficult situations, and how often does it come to that place?
Yeah. So, well, Jamie, so to quote you, some team health issues are not fixable. So, well, Jim Collins, right? He's got the classic quote, right? You got to get the right people on the bus, the right people in the right seats, and the wrong people off the bus. So I mean, that of course is one of the things that, actually I do in day one with all clients, is help them figure out, do we have the right people who are wrong people, right? And what do we need to do? So I think you have to rip the Band-Aid off there first, and all the consultants and all the books and all the whatever workshops in the world is not going to fix wrong people issues. And I tell clients that all the time. I'm not a miracle worker. Nobody is. So we might as well just put certain categories of people in that bucket. But here's the thing: most of us, most people, then I would say, are a right person. But there's always a better version of us individually, and definitely a better version of the team. And that's where all of the team health tools and workshops and emphasis on it will pay dividends, because both, one-on-one between certain people, and then as a, leadership team or a departmental team, for them to work through, say something like, the classic one is Patrick Lencioni's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Like, that's one that, whoever's listening to this, if you've never done this with your team, buy his book. You can, there's lots of stuff out there about how you can do it. And it's, it's all about trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, and results. And like, just start there, and you're going to get a ton of value out of just having those discussions with your team.
Do you ever get to a point where it's the partners that are the issues, and not maybe the management?
Well, yeah, I mean, their whole, right, everything flows down, right, from, the ownership. And so, yes, so often, I do have to have like some offline conversations with the ownership about things. And because, everybody else is noticing, right, whatever those partner issues, maybe while they may not be explicitly being talked about, people are pretty insightful. So and that's part of the reason to bring in somebody like me, right? We were kind of that outside objective set of eyes, because ultimately I have no problem telling clients really hard things, because I know they need to hear it, and yeah, it is, I've had a number of clients who have had, partners leave and things like that, but that's all for the best, right? Those, those partners have to leave, that company, it had either outgrown them or, they no longer believe in the direction. So, they weren't in their best place. So, they need to, go off and do something that, matches what their talents and their passion.
So you've had clients bring you in to help you solve the problem, and find out that person is the problem.
Well, yeah. So, yeah, yes. Yeah. I mean, our clients are always bringing me in to help them, right, run a better business, right? So in some ways, it's kind of it's really about the business, and so yeah, partners can come and go, or any key role. Sometimes maybe it's not. It could be like a non-owner who's another key leader in the business. That could be the person holding it back. But oftentimes there's a lot of fear because that person, they have history, they have knowledge. That if they walk out the door, there'll be a big hole. But again, they can be often causing more damage, maybe because of the way they're treating their employees or something like that, or just the vibe they give off, or that they don't believe in where the owners want to take the business. They want to maybe keep it a certain size and be comfortable in their position.
And most time it's 100% perfect in both scenarios. When a partner leaves, the partner is probably feeling like they don't belong, or they don't, they're in a different zone or a different path. And I think it might be more of an excuse, hey, someone finally told me outside that what I'm feeling is correct, and I'm okay feeling that way, but the company itself might have to miss me.
Yeah. And, I think that's one of the things that, again, for your audience, right, for, agencies, kind of the different, levels that they're going to go through. There's sort of that, early on in an agency, often the owners are sort of like maybe the 2 or 3 or however many people initially who are around at the start, and they all, one was a developer, one was a designer, one was good at business operations. It's like, all right, let's form a business. And that's great, but it'll probably get you to a certain level. And then some people, right, they just can't keep growing with the business, and they become actually the lid on growth. And then if also the whole, businesses, entrepreneurial businesses, another thing that can happen is kind of confusing ownership with leadership, right? So, technically, and it should be the case, and I'll often tell this to clients as well up front, that you can be fired from your W-2 job. Even though you're an owner, that does not guarantee you, right, W-2 employment, right? And I've had, some owners like push back, but it's like, I know that's hard to hear, but that is a true statement. So if you're an owner who's really kind of laying down that card that I'm an owner, so I should stay, head of whatever X, Y, or Z, and everybody else is looking at you like you're the person that's holding the business back. Well, you're devaluing your ownership in the business, and again, you're not flourishing, or you're not letting your team flourish because you're just not willing to let go. So, so if you were head of development, is it that you need to like just go be a developer and let somebody else, and you probably could flourish there and let somebody else lead development and just remain an owner, but just don't be a leader.
Yeah, I think when you had come in and helped Summit out, whether it was like 5-6 years ago, whenever it was, the one tool that kind of relates to this the most, that I really like and took a lot back, and I'd say Adam as well, was the accountability chart. Not an organizational chart, but an accountability chart. And could you kind of explain that? Because it really kind of helped us put each other in the right lanes, I guess.
Yeah. So again, this is something in Pinnacle we do on day one. So we've got another kind of up-level approach. So what I do is come in and say that, all right, so yeah, we have to define organization, what's our structure, kind of big picture, and then we're going to drill down, create seats and roles, responsibilities for people. But we start with every business has 3 big functions: get work, do work, and get paid. And so we start saying, okay, well, to get work, what are the functions that we need? Okay, clarify that. Then go on to, okay, do work. What are those functions that we need? And again, we say, forget about current people and current titles and all that. You got to like presume you all win the lottery, and if new people came into the business, to kind of open up their mindset. So once we sort of identify something like with, so it's like, okay, well, we need a marketing function separate from sales. It's because often, right, they're combined. There are different ways you can do it depending on the kind of business. So it's like, okay, we need a marketing function. Okay, so we need to build the seat then for the person that's going to lead marketing. So we do that, and building a seat. So in Pinnacle, our approach is for leadership seats. We say there's a few common ones. First, coach, mentor, and manage. Right, all the people issues leader needs. Second is own the process. So if you're the leader of marketing, you got to own the marketing process. And then the third is just simply the marketing goals, KPIs, right? You own those. So no surprise there, but those are 3 bullet points. Again, if somebody's listening and doing an accountability chart, put those 3 in. And then we come up with maybe 2 to 3 more very specific, unique, say, to the marketing leader. Okay, what are they responsible for? What are the outcomes that they need to deliver to the business to be successful? And then 2 other things we list as well in the seats. One is just KPIs. So on a weekly or monthly basis, what are 1 to 3 essential KPIs that person has to deliver on? And then the other one actually, as well, is actually list out the meetings that they're in. That's also a very helpful thing in building out the seats. So that was the marketing leader. So you do that for all the leaders, and then you just start building out the seats below, right? So for the marketing team, what other seats are needed? Oftentimes, that could be an outsourced, resource, but even if they're using, say, an outside marketing agency, well, still build a seat for that vendor, right? Because they need to deliver, right? And then if you ever get to the point where you're going to hire for that position and no longer use the outside resource, you'll have the seat already built, or you kind of know what that looks like. So that's how we build the accountability chart or functional accountability chart. And then of course we got to put people in there, but yeah, that's the building of it.
Yeah, I think the cool thing about it is you're building the company and putting people in it versus taking the existing people and creating a company around it. It's completely two different things.
Yeah, and one thing I always say to teams as we're entering into building the functional accountability chart is go back to the Gallup Q12. It's an employee engagement survey, and the very first question in that survey is, "I know what's expected of me at work." So that's one of the things I tell the teams is that, okay, this seat we're building, right? Everybody in the agency should ultimately see the accountability chart and know, of course, what they're responsible for, but also what everybody else is expected to deliver. And when you do build out that accountability chart really well, it helps avoid kind of the lane violations that often happen, like 2 or more people kind of working on the same thing, or two people being responsible but nobody's really responsible. So yeah, there's a lot of benefit. And the other thing too about it, if you do the accountability chart really well, is that you can kind of create your current one, or maybe even the next 6 months, kind of have some room to grow into it, and then you can create one, say, that's 2 years out. Because especially, right, if you've done division work, it's like, hey, we want to be twice the size in 3 years or whatever. Well, let's build that accountability chart and then see how they differ. And that gives you a roadmap of, who you need to hire, how you need to develop people internally, move them around internally, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, every time
when you do that 5-year approach, it doesn't mean you got to hire those people right now. It means you can grow.
Well, because Summit won't let you. Yeah, your CFO won't let you. So
that's right.
Yeah, and every time I've been part of the accountability conversation, both at Summit and with my clients, it's been super helpful, both for me as an employee to be like, okay, this is where I stand and what my KPIs are and what's important for me and what I really need to do, but also with clients, just to see everybody have direction really helps. So I'm gonna have one final question here for you, Tom, and then we'll wrap it up. But you mentioned 70 tools. I imagine you haven't been able to use all of them yet. I know I've had a power washer in my garage for like 6 months that I haven't touched yet, and I was pretty excited to actually use it last weekend and clean the garage out. So what is the tool you haven't used yet that you're kind of excited to try out?
Oh, wow. Great question. So just recently, one of the tools that was added is a tool called psychological safety. And so I think the idea, so when I first heard it, I'm like, that sounds great. And the Pinnacle guy who created it, he based it off 2 books that are out there on psychological safety. And I can't wait to start using that with clients. So I'm probably going to use it a lot in their annual session, because we've done things like the 5 dysfunctions. So the psychological safety concept is very related to it, but it really helps leaders see, okay, am I creating a psychologically safe environment for my team so that, that they can all be their best and, feel included, feel like they can challenge, right? All those kinds of things. So yeah, well, you could be, I could try it out on you all. So
that's what I was going to say.
That'd be fine with us.
Because that might be a good one for us. Yeah.
Maybe not on this call, but
no, that wouldn't work. But
that'd be an interesting.
That's great.
Yeah,
we could do that another time. Great. Yeah. So definitely a great topic, and really excited for this new direction you've gone, and I'm really excited about that. But any final thoughts? I'll start with you, Tom, and then I'll throw it over to you, Jody.
So yeah, final thoughts just for the audience in terms of, again, business operating systems. Check them all out. Just be open to which one is going to be right for you, and also at this stage of your agency, and that whatever business operating system you pick now may not be the same one you need 2-3 years from now. And then I would just say fully buy in, whichever one you land on. Fully buy into that and lean into the hard parts, so that you actually get out of that system what's intended from its creation.
Great. Jody?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same thing. I mean, when Tom mentioned tons of books when he first came on there, and I've read all those books multiple times, and many other books multiple times. And it seems like I can get something little out of each book, but really don't buy into the entire process. And I won't name names. Maybe I like the way that this book or talks about how to run meetings, and how this book talks about how to set goals. But the combination of them, I think, what makes us the way we are. And what I liked about what Tom had mentioned is that that's what he does. He brings in the best of each of those concepts and ideas and molds it into the business model that you're trying to create. And I think that's important to understand, because I really, truly don't believe one thing fits all when it comes to any kind of process, KPI, you name it. I think you really have to kind of look inside the business and kind of mold it to what the business is looking for and their goals they're trying to achieve. So I love the concept, and I've been with Pinnacle now I've been with Tom since for 6 years or so, probably 7 years, a long time. It's been a great success, and one of the biggest reasons why we've been so successful is the kind of the light that his team has shed on us and helped us really grow to where we're going. And we're not done growing. We've got some really high expectations, and looking to do a 5 times multiple over the next 5 years. And so that's a pretty significant jump, and again, something that we couldn't do without Tom's help.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. A lot of our knowledge is a combination of what we read and what we do, right? So you don't want to just read one book and say, okay, this is what I'm doing 100%. You have to make sure you're going through and applying different things, which is why we did our training program. A big part of it is based on that knowledge of getting knowledge from other people and experts. And I will note the one book that isn't part of our training program that you didn't mention was Jody's books. So in your future podcasts, hopefully you can pull those out there, because those are all part of our training program as well. So make sure that the future podcasts of those get pulled out too, Tom. Not our podcast, but
we'll do.
Podcasts.
Yeah, others. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks guys for joining, and this is a great episode. Appreciate you guys.
All right. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving business success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.